Okay, let's get started. Before we start, just a couple of friendly reminders. Please remain with your microphones muted. If you have any questions, you can type them on the chat. We will have the time at the end to review them and answer your questions. And also remember that you can activate your English closed captioning at the bottom of your screen. It's available for as a live transcript. Next slide, please. Thank you. Happy International Education Week. This week, we celebrate the benefits of international education and exchange worldwide. This joint initiative is of the U.S. Department of State and the U.S. Department of Education as part of our efforts to promote programs that prepare you for a global environment and also to attract future leaders from abroad to study, to learn, and to exchange experiences. Next slide, please. Welcome again, everyone, to our session on studying law in the United States, how to apply and succeed. My name is Yandi Reynoso, and I am one of the advisors for Education USA in Mexico City. And today we have a special guest from the University of Minnesota Law School, Hannah Keeter. She will introduce herself in a couple of more minutes, but we are very happy and excited to have you here with us to talk a little bit more about how to study law in the US. Welcome, Hannah, and welcome everyone. Next slide, please. Before we start, we would like to just give a brief overview of what Education USA is and our services. Education USA is a U.S. Department of State network of over 430 international student advising centers in more than 175 countries and territories. Our network promotes U.S. higher education to students around the world by offering accurate, comprehensive, and current information about the different opportunities available to you to study at accredited institutions in the United States. We are your official source on U.S. higher education. Next slide. All of our services and activities, such as workshops, webinars, personalized sessions, are free of charge. If you are interested in learning a little bit more about our activities and services, I recommend you to please visit our official website, educationusa.state.gov. Also, whether you plan to pursue a short-term or full degree program in the US, Education USA has your 5 steps to US studies. And again, you can learn a little bit more about these 5 steps at our Education USA official website or by reaching out to your closest advising center. Thank you so much, Hannah, again, for being here with us today and celebrating International Education Week, and the time is yours.
Thank you very much, Yandi. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for hosting me. Again, I'm Hannah Keeter. I'm the Assistant Director of International Programs at the University of Minnesota Law School. Delighted to be working with Education USA again. I just returned from more than 2 weeks in Latin America, unfortunately not Mexico, but with the Education USA LLM tour. And I'm very excited about International Education Week and spreading the word about law school in the US. So just really briefly, the agenda. We've introduced Education USA, International Education Week, and myself. I'm going to start pretty generally. What law schools and what degrees we offer, what is it like here in the US? More specifically then about the application and admission processes, then once you're here, how to succeed, and then once you graduate, what your options are. So really quickly, I'm from the University of Minnesota. There's a map there. You can see where we are. It's a beautiful place to live. We're a huge university. The law school is relatively small, so you get the best of both worlds. If you have any more questions about us specifically, please ask me at the end. So there are lots of good reasons to study in the United States, as I'm sure Yandi and her staff can tell you. Law specifically is a unique situation about studying in the US, I think. The primary reason most students come to the US is to improve their legal English skills. I am not a lawyer, my sister is, and even talking to her about some law stuff, legalese is what we call it. The vocabulary, the way lawyers talk about things, it's just different, even for native English speakers. So really improving your legal English is a huge asset to studying in the US. Of course, if you are here immersed in the culture, learning more about the legal system, you will, of course, increase your knowledge and understanding of US laws, the US legal system. There are a lot of international students in the US, and so it's a great opportunity to network with lawyers from around the world. Talking to my colleagues on this trip last week, a lot of us have students representing more than 10, 15, even 20 different countries in the same cohort in the same school. It's a great opportunity to gain practical experience with the US legal system. Hands-on practical experience is sort of a hallmark of the United States education system. And so there are lots of opportunities to do that either for credit or through volunteering in the US. And then if you do the one-year LLM, it's a nice way to test it out, to sort of try, do you like the US legal education system? Do you enjoy the style of the classroom and the teaching, the Socratic method? If yes, maybe you want to stay for another 2 years and get a JD, or even more years and earn the doctoral, the research-based doctoral SJD. Or maybe you decide 1 year is enough and you've got that degree and then you can go home and keep practicing. In the United States, there are 199 accredited law schools, and the accrediting body is called the American Bar Association, or the ABA. These are the most common law degrees. The Juris Doctor is standard if you want to practice in the United States. That's what all domestic US lawyers need to have in order to take the bar and be practicing attorneys. The Master of Law degree is geared mostly toward international lawyers, which is that 1-year degree. You come to the US, you get your coursework done, maybe you do a thesis, and then you return home. There are also several law degrees for people who don't have a background in law. So the Juris Master, the Master of Science in Law, the Master of Comparative Law, that's more for people who just want more of a taste of law, but maybe they have a background in something else. Then there is a PhD and an SJD, which are the Doctor of Juridical Science and the Doctor of Philosophy, the research-based doctorates in law. Most law programs will accept international students, but not all law programs are a great fit. Like I said, the JD is required to work in the US long-term, whereas the LLM is preferred for most international students and accomplishes most goals that you might have. I will say that the SJD, or sometimes the PhD, depending on the school, is more common and is usually usually obtained by people who want to be professors at home. So again, the JD is 3 years. It makes you eligible to take any bar exam in the United States. It is the gold standard for attorneys staying here to practice, and the vast majority are US domestic students. The LLM program will make you eligible to take the bar exam in some states. Each state is its own jurisdiction, which is very interesting and a little confusing sometimes, but we are here to help as law school staff, of course. You can do a general LLM, take all sorts of different classes about different aspects of the US legal system, or you can really specialize on something like US business law or tax law or human rights law, something like that. Many of us at law schools in the US offer the option to apply to transfer to the JD program after you've completed that 1-year LLM. And in most cases, you would be able to count those credits as part of your JD and earn both degrees in about 3 years total. And again, the majority of students in any LLM program are international students. Most are very recent graduates of their bachelor's of law degrees and don't have a lot of work experience, but there are quite a few, increasingly, I think, professional attorneys who are at a stage in their career where they want to get a promotion, to specialize in something they've been practicing and aren't feeling quite as confident about. Almost all LLM students are very motivated attorneys, and the LLM is a means to an end. It is a box that they want to check so they can continue their professional career. Most LLM students are not trying to be academics necessarily. So in the LLM programs that I run, we have a general LLM and a business law LLM. I can tell you that at the fairs that I was at in the last couple of weeks around South America, tax law is one of the most common specialized LLM degrees. Also things like intellectual property or human rights and new democracies, things like that. So on the right, you can see our concentrations. Which just means that about half your courses will be in that subject area. And those are often sort of common specialized degrees as well in other law schools. If you know you're interested in earning a law degree in the US and you're not sure where to start looking, talk to your Education USA advisor, of course, but to do your own research, I recommend starting with LSAC. That is almost all law schools in the United States, for almost all law programs, require that you apply via LSAC, and it is a really great resource for starting your research on what law programs exist as well. When you create your account, you can sign up to be visible in something called a CRS query, and I can honestly say I am not 100% certain what CRS stands for, but that is you consenting to make your information available to us so we can send you information on our events. There are a lot of law schools who during the pandemic banded together to create consortia. And so I'm in a consortium of about 15 law schools. I know there are 2 or 3 others that have varying numbers of law schools, and we do virtual events together. If you're visible in the CRS query, we will email you and let you know this, we're hosting this event in a time zone or at a time that's really conducive for your time zone. Maybe you'd be interested and you can attend that and learn more about all the schools in the different consortia. Virtual events are the best way to learn about law schools around the world. The consortium that I'm in is called the US LLM Legal Education Conference. Like I said, there are several that exist now since the pandemic began. Other websites or different publications that talk about events and have information include LLM Guide, the International Jurist, organizations like LEASE that host in-person events when those are possible. And then LSAC also has forums. So those are in-person events typically. Not a lot of international students attend them, but they are in big cities like Los Angeles and New York and Miami. So if you happen to be traveling around that time, you're more than welcome to attend the forum and learn more about law degrees there too. So like I said, most law schools want you to apply via LSAC, and it is a really convenient one-stop shop for the application. You upload all of your materials, and then you tell the system, I want to apply to these law schools, and it's all taken care of electronically. Most law school applications require very, very similar, if not the same materials. So you will need the application form with just sort of your general information. You will need to submit official transcripts, the records of the classes you've taken and the scores that you got in those classes. At least 2, if not 3 letters of recommendation. I can talk more about tips about that later if you'd like. The personal statement, which I will definitely talk more about in a minute. You need to prove that you are proficient in English. That is, I think, one of the most important parts of an application. If you are not proficient in English, you cannot be successful in law school. Like I said, legal English, the vocabulary, the structure of the language is difficult even for us who speak English as a native language. So do yourself a favor, help yourself be successful and take the IELTS, take the TOEFL. Education USA has great workshops for preparing for those, helping you study. That is a really, really important part of a law school application. If you are applying for the JD degree, you will also likely be required to take sort of a graduate level exam. Historically, that has been the law school assessment test. I think that's what the LSAC stands for, or LSAT stands for, but I'm not sure. Since the pandemic, the GRE, the Graduate Records Examination, is also accepted some places. So make sure you ask, which tests am I required to submit for this school or this program? It is very convenient to use LSAC. I will say there are some fees associated with it as well. This is for everybody's benefit. It's easy for you. It saves you a lot of time. You don't have to send multiple copies of transcripts to various different schools. LSAC has an entire team of people who are experts in evaluating and authenticating transcripts from around the world. So we as law school staff people don't need to know what the equivalent of an A or an A- or whatever is. So I will say that the application fee on the bottom here does vary by law school, and that is the one thing that we can control. So if you attend a session like this through Education USA, if you attend a virtual event through one of the consortiums, ask afterward, hey, I attended this event. Can you waive the $50 application fee for me when I apply, or the $70 application fee when I apply? Most of us are very happy to do that if you did attend and are showing that interest and that extra motivation even this early before you even apply. So again, the TOEFL and IELTS are the most common tests that we expect to see for English proficiency. Since the pandemic began, some schools are accepting Duolingo. We are not. I think it's less common for law schools and more common for other undergraduate and graduate programs. Some JD programs don't require English proficiency and would require the LSAT or GRE instead. But I will tell you, I don't think the LSAT is necessarily the best assessment of English language. I think TOEFL and IELTS have historically proven that that is the standard for academic English and proving that you are proficient. So talk to law schools about that if you have any questions, or any graduate program. We also, a lot of us offer summer programs in English, legal skills. We have a great program. It's 3 weeks online and 3 weeks in person. Other schools have 1 week or 2 weeks here or there. Some of them are required. They will have sort of brackets of, if you score between these two scores on the TOEFL or IELTS, you'll be required to enroll in our summer English program, and then you can enroll in the LLM program. I learned recently that there are some law schools in the US, Boston and Indiana are the two that are coming to mind, who have 2-year LLM degrees. So if you are not confident in your level of English, you can enroll for 1 full year in a legal English program as a full-time student before enrolling in the LLM law school only courses. That's a really great opportunity for you to spend more time in the US to really get good at English. And to really acclimate to the culture, have more opportunities to network with US lawyers. So there are opportunities for long-term as well as short-term summer programs in English. So thinking about a law school application and what makes it good. As someone who is part of the admissions committee at the University of Minnesota, and talking to all of my colleagues at these fairs about what their admission process is like, almost everybody uses a holistic review. It is very unusual that there would be sort of a formula or a rubric of, if your GPA is between this and this, and you have this many years of work experience, and this type of personal statement, you will be admitted and get this amount of scholarship. It's much more holistic. So we look at all parts of it, understanding that some applicants will be stronger academically and maybe not have as much professional experience, or the opposite. Perhaps students or applicants have several years of work experience and are very mature and have learned a lot, but they weren't very mature in their bachelor's degree, and their grades might not have been that good. So we look at everything as a whole, understanding that we want a variety of different types of students in our cohort. So it's not better or worse to have, better grades or worse grades or more work experience, unless a program specifically requires that. But we understand that you're a whole complex person. The personal statement is a really unique aspect of law school applications. And I really think it's one of your only opportunities to talk about yourself What makes you unique and interesting? What are you going to contribute to the cohort that no one else can? It's also a chance for you to be more explicit with us and very specific about, I have looked up these professors and I'm excited to take classes with them. I know that I want to do the immigration law concentration and I'm really excited about this specific course. That tells us as an admissions committee that you have done your research, you have done your homework, you understand a little bit about us as a school, and that's going to set you up for a much more positive admissions experience going forward than maybe an interview and then probably being admitted. The letters of recommendation are also an important part. Some applicants think that it is more important to have someone very impressive write a letter of recommendation. For example, the dean of their law school or the partner at the law firm where they work. I would disagree. I think that it's most important to have someone write a letter of recommendation for you who actually knows your skills, your work ethic, what you're good at, what you're not good at, and they can be really honest in that letter. It will make a much bigger difference to us if you have a colleague or a direct supervisor say they are really learning a lot about this skill, even though they're not excellent at it yet. And I really think the LLM will help them in this way, versus a partner or a dean who maybe met you at an event or taught you in one class, but doesn't really remember you. That's not helpful for you. And it's not helpful for us to understand who you are as a person and how well you will succeed in our LLM program. Another way that Education USA can be helpful is by helping you prepare your application, reviewing, proofreading. Please have someone who's either a native English speaker or has spent time studying in the United States review your application. I work at the University of Minnesota. Every year, we receive at least one application that's addressed to the University of Michigan. I'm not going to deny you if you misaddress the application, but it does show that you maybe aren't as paying close attention to detail as you probably should be for something this important. So Education USA advisors would be my first recommendation of who you should ask to help you review all of your documents. Triple check that everything is included and addressed to the correct school, and then make sure you apply at least 2 to 3 months before the deadline. So every school has a slightly different deadline. Some schools allow you to start either in the fall semester in August or in the spring semester in January. There are lots of different deadlines. So make a spreadsheet or like a really nice Post-it or something like that so that you can keep track of which schools you're applying to and what their specific deadlines are. And then make sure you apply with plenty of time very early so you can consider all of your options. If you're at an Education USA event like this, I assume you're a great student. You're going to get admitted to several schools. So give yourself time to be thoughtful, do more research after you've received the admission letters to really consider the scholarship options, the size of the city, lots of other things like that before accepting an offer and making your final decision. So some pro tips I always try and mention during the application process. Like I said earlier, attend the events. This is the best way, to hear the legal English application process, vocabulary, things like that. It's the best way to learn about different law schools. We really are a collaborative group, the international administrators in law schools. And like I said, ask for application fee waivers. That is one of the ways we can help you financially at this early stage, and we're more than happy to do so if you are showing this motivation to be involved this early. Be confident. If you attend an event with 10 law schools and there are 3 that you want to learn more about, contact each of them and ask for a Zoom meeting or a phone call, or email them your list of questions so they can get back to you. The more you can make yourself known and get to know us throughout the process, the more that will help you as you're going through, both to understand what you want and don't want in the process, and it will help us to know you throughout the process as well, and whether or not you'd be a good fit for our program. All almost all law schools will be more than happy to connect you with an alum if you want. So whether that's a recent graduate from maybe your city, if that's possible, or just another Spanish speaker, so you can ask your questions in your native language, which might be more comfortable for you. Our alumni, our graduates are always very happy to help. And so if that would be helpful for you to hear from a current student or a recent graduate, ask. Like I said, our alumni are happy to help, and we can certainly connect you with somebody if that would be interesting and helpful to you. And again, in the personal statement, in these conversations, as much as you can show that you have done some research and understand a little bit about the law school you're interested in and inquiring about, that will be helpful for you in the process. So let's imagine you have applied to 5 law schools, you've been admitted to 4, now you have 4 really great options for where you want to earn your law degree. You have to decide what's best for you. And there are a lot of factors to consider as you're making this really important decision. It's very important that you get what you want out of the experience and you enjoy it. Law school is difficult. It's a lot of work. You will also have free time, and you want to be able to enjoy that. So some things to consider that I always recommend students think long and hard about. For example, the law school itself. Do you want a giant cohort of 100 LLM students, or do you want a smaller program that's maybe 20 or 30 or 40 and you can get to know them better? Is it important to you that you have a pre-LLM like legal English program beforehand to help you sort of ease into law school? Do you want a general degree or a specialized degree? And then what connections do you want after you graduate? The Global Alumni Network is something we talk about a lot. And it's true. I just met with alumni in Brazil, Argentina, Chile. I met on Zoom with a Mexican alum the other day. We really are staying connected, and people enjoy that. And that's not just friendships, but it is professional connections as well. The larger university does affect your law school experience. So the University of Minnesota is a huge public university. There are 50,000 students total. You can really get some of that stereotypical American college experience if you want. Things like the Big Ten, athletic conference for football games, volleyball games, things like that. That's what a lot of students want, and that's part of why they pick schools like Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan. And some students want a smaller, maybe calmer atmosphere. So thinking about the total number of students, what events and activities you want to go to, do you want access to classes in other departments, how many libraries do you have access to, and then of course the city or town that you will be in. Thinking about the bigger the city, the more opportunities to connect with attorneys and lawyers there. But you might also not be able to get to know them quite as well as if you were in a smaller town where there are fewer options, there are fewer lawyers there, but you have a lot more opportunity to get to know them well. The bigger the city, the better transportation they're going to have. Things like weather, how much sunshine do you need? It has been snowing for 3 days in a row here in Minnesota. We've got lots of snow. Is that something you want to experience? Do you want to be able to brag to your friends, I survived a Minnesota winter? Or do you need a little more sunshine and consistent weather? Things like access to Mexican food. Are you going to be homesick? Do you want a community of expatriates or immigrants that you can go to and feel at home more when you're homesick, or is that not something you think you'll need? There's a lot to think about with that location aspect. Again, Education USA will have a lot more information than I can. I'm an expert only essentially in my scholarships, in my merit awards, and they know a lot more about other institutions and organizations that have financial aid. Excuse me, but I will say almost all law schools have some sort of scholarship for international students. It would be tuition only for the most part. I have not talked to any colleague who is able to provide a scholarship or financial aid stipend for things like housing or food or living expenses, but every little bit helps. There are lots of grants available, of course, Fulbright. There are different local organizations and United States organizations that Education USA would know more about. There are loans, things like the Roe Fund through the Organization of American States. There are companies. Then you can also ask family and friends. We have students put together all sorts of different ways to fund their law school education. To enter the United States, you will need an F1 visa. And in order to be granted that visa, you have to prove that you have all of the financial support you will need for the year. Sometimes students will borrow that money from their family, knowing that they can then work on campus a little bit. I will say law students don't have a ton of time if they want to be good at classes and get good grades and have some free time to really enjoy life in the United States, get to know the culture. So I wouldn't count on working a lot if you're going to be a law student in the US, but it is an option. And there are always students who are able to make that work with classes and socializing in free time. So then how do you succeed once you're here? You've figured it all out. You've arrived in the US. That's the hard part, but also so is law school. Like I said at the beginning, the English is probably the hardest part for a lot of students. And so really committing to only speaking English as much as possible. If you're going to get a roommate, find a roommate who doesn't speak Spanish. That will be very challenging, and it will help you a lot in the long run. You will be more successful in class. You will be more successful on your exams. And in the long run, the English will absorb deeper into your brain for the long term. It's a lot of reading, and especially if English isn't your native language, it takes a little longer to read. Those pre-LLM legal English courses really focus on how to read quickly and how to find the important parts in legal English or in law school textbooks, reading cases, understanding how to find the important things so you're not spending quite as much time just reading the same paragraph over and over trying to understand it. People like me who work in the admission office are here to help. There's always someone on the team who is a legal English professor, for example. But most professors, even if they don't only work with LLM students, are very happy to help. And if you're not comfortable talking to a professor, ask your friends, ask your classmates, ask a domestic US JD student. People in the US, I think in my region of the country especially, but really anywhere, are very happy to help, and they're very interested in learning from international students, talking to you, seeing how they can help, because they learn from you as well. And then find a balance. Like I said, law school is a lot of work, but you will have free time, even if it's only a little bit. So it's important that you keep your mental health happy and stable. Make sure you eat enough food, drink enough water, get enough exercise, all of that. And that, I think, is the moral of the story for everything in life, isn't it? So you graduated with your law degree, you want to stay in the US for a little bit. There are some options for you at that point. As I mentioned, if you earn the JD, you will be eligible for any bar exam. If you can earn a JD in any state at any university that's accredited, and you can take the bar exam in any other state as well. In an LLM program, you can earn your LLM in any state, but only some states will allow you to take the bar. The most common are New York and California for LLM students, but about half the states in the US will allow you to take the bar exam with just an LLM and a law degree from outside the United States. There's a great website I can send you if you're interested for each jurisdiction and looking at its eligibility standards. It is the student's responsibility to learn about that and be familiar with the requirements for the jurisdiction that you are interested in. We can help a little bit, but we just don't have the time or mental capacity to be experts in all 50 states, plus the Washington, D.C. There are some bar exams that require students to take a specific number of credits and perhaps specific subject areas or specific courses. So that is another thing to keep in mind as you're planning your academic career, your coursework. And I will say, set realistic expectations. Every year we have students take the bar exam and pass, and every year we have LLM students take the bar and not pass. The same is true for JD students, both native English speakers and not. Different jurisdictions' bar exams are historically, stereotypically a little more difficult than others. So talk to your friends, talk to graduates, ask questions if you're thinking about taking the bar exam. if you're here on an F1 visa, you can apply to extend your visa 12 months to stay and work in your field of study. Some students will apply for OPT. That's this process is optional practical training, in order to extend their visa to study and then take the bar, and they don't have any intention of working, and then they leave after the 90-day grace period, and that's fine. Many students do want actual work experience and then work with the career centers, the career offices in the law schools to help find a job. Working in a law firm or at a clinic, or even volunteering is an option as well. LLMs, if you've heard about curricular practical training, LLM students are not eligible for that because it's a one-year program, and curricular practical training has to be after 1 year while you're still enrolled. That's all I have for the moment. I hope you have some questions. I see there are some things in the chat, and I'm more than happy to help if you've got questions about Minnesota specifically. Otherwise, the more international students we have in the United States, even if it's not at my law school, any law school, the better for all of us, I think. So what questions do we have?
Thank you, Hannah, for your presentation. And yes, we have some questions. We are going to start with, what do our law schools look for in an applicant?
So different law schools have different preferences, I guess. I think all of us have essentially the same requirements as far as you have to have a law degree and you need to have decent grades. I think if they need something specific, they will tell you on their website or during the application process. For example, some law schools and LLM programs require 3 to 4 years of work experience before being eligible, for example. Most of us don't, but that is an option. I think having good English, being able to write, a lot of us do interviews on Zoom or Skype. Even before the pandemic, we were using Zoom and Skype to do that. And so the ability to articulate yourself, to be in a conversation in a relaxed way, talking about both academic and more informal things, that helps. And just being confident that you have what it takes to succeed in the United States goes a long way.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Can LL students apply for OPT and CPT?
OPT, yes. CPT, no.
Okay. Could you explain maybe the reason or the process to apply for OPT?
Yes. So LLM students are not eligible for CPT because you have to be enrolled in a program for 1 year before you are eligible, but you must be enrolled then after CPT as well. And LLM is only a 1-year degree. So you graduate after 1 year. So then there's just no time to take CPT. For OPT, there's a very specific timeline during which you need to apply. And I am not an expert on this, so I do encourage you to talk to the Education USA advisors about this more. But you apply within a specific time period. And then after you graduate, you have 90 days to find a job. And if you find a job or like a full-time volunteering position, something like that, you can stay for up to 12 months after your graduation date. If you don't find a job within those 90 days, then you need to leave the country. There is some flexibility. For example, if you spend 30 days looking for a job and find a job, but it's only a 6-month position, that's fine. After that 6 months is done, you have the remainder of that 90-day grace period to find another job or leave. It's a little complicated, but that is something that a lot of students do to get more work or volunteer experience.
Okay, thank you. We have other questions, and is TOEFL required in all schools?
All schools require proof of English proficiency. Almost all schools require either TOEFL or IELTS. Those are the global recognized standard of what is a good English proficiency exam. Some schools will also accept Cambridge or Duolingo, but TOEFL and IELTS are the most common. And if you're unsure about which schools you're going to apply to, take the TOEFL. That is the most widely accepted English exam.
Thank you. We have one specific question for your university. Does University of Minnesota offer academic writing workshop?
Ooh, yes. We have, and I'm sure a lot of universities have this too, but we have some great sort of workshops, classes through the general graduate school, not necessarily through the law school, that are just about academic writing, about sort of using the different research databases you have access to, working on a thesis if you end up in the doctoral program. A lot of universities have things like that to support students as they're working on their academic career.
Okay. Thank you. And I think that is really helpful for all students to have
Yes.
this opportunity. Okay. We have another question specifically for your university. How hard is to get a scholarship for a JD?
That's a great question. So my job, my responsibility is for the LLM and SJD programs. I work physically closely. My office is next to the JD admission office, but our responsibilities are totally separate. So I can say that there are scholarships for JD students, including international students who apply to the JD program. I don't know any specifics about the amount or the requirements or anything like that, but I'm happy to put their email address in the chat if you'd like to contact them directly. I know they'd be happy to explain that better for you.
Thank you. Another question. What should, as a student, be looking for in a law school?
It depends. I think each student has a unique situation for themselves, what they want as far as academic coursework, different professors they want to work with, as well as, like I was talking about, outside of class, the weather, access to public transportation, access to things that remind you of home. I think every student needs to be really clear on what they need to be happy and healthy and successful, and then be looking at law schools that meet that. So it is obviously the most important part is the academics. What do you want to study? What degree do you want to get? But a very close second, I think it's almost equally important, but not quite, is what are you going to be doing outside of class, outside of the classroom? Where are you going to live? How are you going to spend your time? Yeah, it really depends. I think the Education USA advisor or any admission professional, if like me or my colleagues at other schools, if you're not sure, schedule a meeting with us. We would be happy to spend 20 or 30 minutes asking you questions to help you think about these things so you can apply to schools that would fit what you want and need best, even if it ends up not being my school, for example.
Thank you. That is really helpful for students and also for us advisors.
Yeah.
Okay. After graduations, where do most international students end up? Do they stay or go back to their countries?
The vast majority of LLM students go home. I think some do OPT, some take the bar, but LLM, usually students go home to their home countries. The JD degree is the one that's required for almost all legal jobs in the US. So if your long-term goal in the future is to stay in the US, the JD degree makes more sense, and then that is how that ends up.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Today we have several questions.
Good, I'm glad.
Can I study an LLM even though I did my undergrad degree in a different area of study?
Usually, no. Most LLM programs require a first degree in law to be eligible. There are some exceptions. This is relatively new to my department, but we have an LLM in patent law, and that is meant for students who have a science and technology background. So if you have science or technology, I guess I don't know a lot about that. If you have that type of degree, there are some LLM degrees that you would be eligible for. But for the majority of LLM programs, you have to have a first degree in law first, like an LLB or something.
Okay. And we have a questions for when you're applying through LAAC. Do they have fee waiver? Should all students apply through this?
Yeah, so LSAC is where all students should apply. Some schools allow you to apply via mail, but honestly, it's more difficult for you and it's more difficult for us as the law school. So even if they allow that, I would encourage you to apply via LSAC anyway. Application fee waivers, which is, like I said, maybe $50, $75 per school. That's the fee that we can control. And you can ask us to waive that. And most of us would be happy to do that if you've attended an event like this. The other fees are required by LSAC for their processing, keeping their technology up to date, keeping their staff going to authenticate and evaluate transcripts, that sort of thing. And those we cannot waive.
Okay. Well, I think we are done with the Q&A section of our presentation, and handing back the mic to my colleague Jen. Thank you, Hannah, and thank you all for your questions. Thank you.
Those were great questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Magali, and thank you, Hannah, for your presentation. So before we wrap up and we let you go, is there anything else you would like to add to the presentation regarding University of Minnesota or living in Minnesota? Any additional comments?
I think it's great. Obviously, I'm a little biased, but I do think living in the Midwest, like in the middle of the country, we call this region the Midwest, the cost of living is lower than it is on the coast. So everyone has heard of Los Angeles and Miami and New York and Seattle, and those are great cities with really, really great law schools in them. It costs more to rent an apartment, to take public transportation, to buy food, to pay for electricity. It costs more in those really huge cities on the coast than it does to live in the Midwest, in some place like Minneapolis, in Madison and Iowa City. So that's something to think about if money is something you need to be careful and think about your budget with. Looking at the middle of the country is great. The last thing I will say, I forgot to add this, I'm sorry. The law school rankings in the US News and World Report are based on the JD program only. LLM programs do not factor into that ranking at all. So do not assume that the LLM program at a higher ranked law school is somehow inherently better than at a lower ranked law school. I will say, as an LLM student, you will usually have access to almost all of the same services, many of the same classes as JD students, so you can benefit from that. But it is not a specific indicator about the LLM program. It's only about the JD program.
Okay, thank you for adding that, for adding those comments. So we just want to thank everyone for joining us today in this presentation. Make sure that you contact Hannah if you have further questions about University of Minnesota Law School. She has shared her contact information with you in the presentation. We will be sharing the recording of the session tomorrow, as well as the part of her contact information if you're interested in reaching out to her. And again, thank you so much for being here today. We encourage you to please follow us on social media so you can learn more about our upcoming events, and also make sure to visit our official website if you're interested in connecting with your closest advising center. Thank you so much, Hannah, one more time for being here with us today. It was a great presentation, great information.
Thank you, Yandi. It was a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, and I hope you have a good night. See you soon.